Welcome. My name is Nigel Cohen. I'm a supporter of values-based education. And today, the VbE Values meet is devoted to joy. We've had so much challenges and so much worries and concerns in the last few months that it's really important we get the balance right for living. And so our CEO, Bridget Knight, and one of our trustees, Jane Hawkes, have suggested that we devote this topic to joy and celebration to give a little bit of counterbalance to the really stressful things that are going on. So I welcome also Neil Hawkes, who's our founder, who will be talking to us a bit later on. But if I may, we'll now move over to Bridget Knight, who will introduce the meet. So Bridget, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nigel, for that lovely introduction. Just talking about joy makes me happy, said one of the children at school when we were discussing this as our value for the month. And he was right, wasn't he? When we focus on joy, we focus on the positive, we bring it to life. And you find yourself moving in a direction that perhaps you didn't think you were going to go. I think this is what values do for us, and we thought it would be fitting, as Nigel said, to focus on the value of joy as we approach this end of term and for what has been the most demanding school year for everybody, precisely because we know that throughout these difficult times we've all been focusing on the positive. Really, it's the only thing to do, isn't it? It's like Daniel, a different child to the one I've just quoted. Daniel was a little boy in year 3, and he had the most soulful air about him. You come across these children from time to time, don't you? And they've got really wise heads on young shoulders. And he said to me, show people about values, and then their hearts will fill up with joy. And it's just such a lovely thing to hear from this little mite. He was a little dot. And I thought how right he is. Because, you know, everything we do, we know it applies to us as people, as adults, as well as to the children that are in our care, we're talking to. This approach that we're all espousing, this values-based approach, offers us a way to build our children's sense of themselves, our own sense of ourselves, because it's based on the bedrock of positive, universal human values. And when we understand, like Daniel did, how the values of love and peace and altruism, empathy, how they can help us develop positivity, it offers us a better way to be. It offers us a better way to feel and therefore to live our own lives. This is a well-known Zimbabwean saying, and it's so inspiring. I'm sure you've heard it many times. I've just been talking to my staff on a staff meeting Zoom this morning, and I shared it with them. It's one I use quite often in our values displays. If you can walk, you can dance. If you can talk, you can sing. So just as this quotation suggests, when we talk about a values-based approach, we mean the best of, don't we? We mean giving children the best of everything. We mean dancing, not walking, and singing instead of talking. Because that's our belief, isn't it? If we give our children, and if we give ourselves the opportunity to see and to hear and to experience and take away the best of life, it's so positive, and it sets up a positive cycle. So, as I said to my staff this morning, and I'll say to you now, you might not feel like you've been dancing and you might not feel like you've been singing through this pandemic, and you might actually be feeling like you're on your knees. But actually, I know that what you've been doing is setting in train this massive, positive, virtuous cycle. Because values-based teachers are led by their positive values. And you have a magical way of bringing about the best in people. You bring out the best in staff, you bring out the best in your children, and each and every interaction that you make has a values-based purpose. So I know that you have been exuding values, and I know that through this pandemic, so many in our values family who aren't here, and so many others too, would have been being the quiet heroes of our time and helping to create unexpected joy in unexpected places. So it's with immense gratitude to all of you, and immense honouring that I have the great pleasure of introducing our topic for today, which is joy, and to lead us into in a deeper way, I'm delighted to introduce Jane. Jane Hawkes, who always leads the beautiful moments that we have as a precious nugget for ourselves. And then after that, Neil's going to lead us in a discussion about joy and the place of that in values. And I wish you a joyful morning together. I know it's been a highlight of my time to meet with you, and deep thanks for that. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Bridget, for that just beautiful introduction. And the quotes from the children of your school are just such, so beautiful. Fabulous. So I'm going to invite us to take a moment to pause to be, and I have a little reflection around the whole concept of joy, the value of joy. So first of all, just allow yourself to settle, really feel yourself supported on whatever you're sitting on. That real sense of just knowing that for the next few minutes, you can just be. So letting your body sink deeply into the chair that you're sitting in. And in the consequence, often your spine just rises up naturally, tall. And just if you're happy to, gently closing your eyes or just letting your gaze be soft. Beginning by just allowing yourself to be aware of this moment, aware of your breath, your natural breathing rhythm. The most important gift of life we're ever given is the ability to breathe. And taking a moment to be aware of any activity that may still be going on in your mind. Really, we're learning to notice this, to accept it. Maybe sometimes just taking your breath to your mind, just to honour whatever's going on in there. Maybe just checking if there's any sensations or emotions that are just still within your body. And again, finding that way of just acknowledging them by directing your breath to any tension, any feeling, any sensation. That loving, constant companion, your breath. Now beginning to breathe more deeply. It's really focusing on slightly deepening your breath. Focus on a recent moment of joy. Just trust the first thought that comes to you. Intuition often comes from our innocence and often gives us a really important message. So as you acknowledge that sense of joy, allow yourself to focus on any sensations that are a part of that. Maybe there is an image, maybe not. But whatever you're noticing, just allow your breath to go there. And know that your joy is always within you. Joy is an innate aspect of what it means to be a human being. And even when it feels like there is no joy in your personal life, it's always there, waiting to fill your being and radiate out to others. So, as you breathe deeply, see if there is any opportunity to not only fill your own being with joy, see if it begins to radiate beyond you, into the space that you're in, looking to connect with our global humanity. The power of each of us is infinite. And it is through those connections, one by one, that potentially we start to transform our global humanity, allowing people to really become their true self. And I invite you also to recognize the connection between the heights of your joy and sometimes the depths of our sorrow. And since I was a very young girl, I was influenced by Khalil Gibran's beautiful writing, particularly from the Prophet. And I'd like to share one of my favourite quotes from him, which has really sustained me in times of difficulty. And he says, "The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain." So as we come to close our moment of pausing, just invite you to reconnect with your physical body sitting on the chair. Maybe a sense of any noise that's around you right now, as well as me speaking. To send deep appreciation to your incredible inner world for the gifts it holds for you. And the gifts I know it yearns to share with others. So bringing a little bit of movement into your body. Maybe taking a slightly deeper breath and even having a little sigh. or a big sigh. I welcome you back to our incredible community, our global community, inviting values, universal human values, to become globally uniting the new global narrative for humanity. Thank you.
Jane, thank you. I love that reference to joy being the connection with sorrow, and the deeper you carve sorrow, the greater the joy you contain. It's intriguing and very uplifting, very optimistic, and really what this session is all about. So thank you for so beautifully putting it in such a great context. Can we now move over to Neil Hawkes, the founder of VbE, who's going to lead a session on what's been happening in a joyful sense recently. Neil, over to you.
Thank you, Nigel, and hello, everybody. It's really lovely to see you all here today. And those who are watching us later, when this goes on YouTube, I hope you're having a joyful day as you're watching us. Thank you, Jane, for that really deep reflection. Reflection is at the heart of values-based education. One of our aims as educators is to help children to become reflective learners. And by reflective learners, it is that capacity to use wisdom and pause before taking actions and going internal. And I know from the feedback I get how important that is, not only in joyous times, but when times get a little bit more difficult. Before we came together, some of us were talking about the positive, if you dare to say that, the positive from the pandemic. You can't say there's a positive from the pandemic, but it creates situations which highlight our humanity and what's important to us as human beings. I often say, many of you have heard me say, to be a human being, not a human doing. I know that I have suffered from that in my career in the past. I think I often sit in reflection and think, oh, I wish I could have that all over again. I'd be paying much more attention to the moment by moment that I was experiencing, rather than scurrying on to the next thing to be done. We actually do more when actually we do less. And that's a paradox which takes some getting round. So during the last few weeks, it's now 14 weeks that we've had the pandemic. Is, I think, just coming into our 15th week after the weekend. And I decided very early on to focus my attention on just doing something as simply as I could to help one or two people who may be interested. So I started writing a value for each week. And I'm amazed how this value process has gained momentum, not from me. I've merely carved out some time to write them, but by people who have come back to me and said that they have been helpful as a form of reflective practice on the values themselves. I had someone this morning saying that could she use them in her services? And I thought that's amazing that someone would want to do that. So I hope they have been helpful. But this week I wrote about the value of joy, because there have been moments of real incredible joy for me during the past few weeks. Having the space and time to be more with Jane and having some incredible conversations and connections as we sat doing very simple things, like sitting in our garden. as Paul said before we came on air, as it were, you know, that facility to be in silence and not have aeroplanes flying across and noise, appreciating the simple, but as I think Bridget often says, the simple but profound aspects of life. So where there is love, there is joy, Mother Teresa said. The background of joy is love. I was reflecting whether you can actually be joyous if you are not filled with love. Love is one of our, what we call in VbE, one of our super values. When you put together some of the basic values, they create these super values, composite values of altruism, wisdom, and love particularly. And so I think Mother Teresa, as always, was quite right in highlighting the need for love. We sense joy as an intense, exhilarating feeling. I hope you've felt that feeling yourself. And we feel it during those moments when we feel love, great delight, and vibrant happiness, caused by something that is uniquely good. We can experience a sense of joy too in our connections with other people, in our relationships. I often notice a naive sense of real joy from young children when they look at you, when they've experienced a heightened emotion that's just filled them with awe or wonder, and they just have that look of joy in their eyes. Sadly, I think that joy can be put out slightly by some aspects of our education system. But I know all of you who are values-based teachers look to help people have access to that innate side of themselves, which is joyous. When we are conscious of joy as a value to guide our thinking and behavior, we focus our awareness on appreciating, as I said, the simple yet profound aspects of life. Being joyful, full of joy, is the capacity to delight in the richness, beauty, and diversity of our world. Even during challenging times, joy can be experienced when we take time to celebrate the ineffable aspects of our lives that are often so difficult to express in words. Many of you have heard me quote from Viktor Frankl many times, who suffered life during the Second World War in a concentration camp. He wrote in his fantastic, life-changing book, Man's Search for Meaning, that when it seemed that all his freedoms were taken away from prisoners, there still remained one freedom, the freedom to choose his attitude. This realization can have a profound effect on the quality of our lives, as we stop seeing ourselves as victims of circumstances, but instead use the gift of our life to create moments of joy for others and ourselves. On sunny mornings, Jane and I sit in our garden at the back of the house, and we have a period of stillness and reflection. That's on sunny days, of course. As it is July, our lavender is at its most radiant best and is literally buzzing with life. I have been almost overwhelmed with joy as I have gazed at honeybees scrambling from flower to flower, whilst butterflies flex their wings as they pause between flights. For nearly 4 months, I have seen my younger grandchildren on Zoom for a session called Grandpa's Story, which I've really enjoyed. It's been a wonderful, joyous time to stay connected as we shared our love of stories. However, the intense joy I felt this last weekend, when I was able to go on a cycle ride with some of them, made me realize how easy it is in, quotes, normal, close quotes, times to take such experiences for granted. I do passionately hope that each and every one of you has, in these very difficult times, had those moments of joy. Take a moment today to just pause, if you can be in nature, experience the ongoing rhythm of life that nature presents to us and feel connected to it, because it is in those moments you can have a holistic appreciation of the wonders of our world, which will fill both your intellect and heart with incredible joy. I really enjoyed thinking about joy. I do want more joy in all your lives, I really do. Often when you listen to the news, it's all focused on gloom and doom, and they don't give positive news as they could. Therefore, that's why I've always said to folk, never watch news after about 6:30 in the evening, unless you want a sleepless night. So I'm going to invite you now to just share perhaps one or two or more moments of joy that you've experienced during this period of lockdown, to use that expression. So may I invite you now to share with us all for the next few minutes your experiences, however simple or however profound. Thank you.
Oh, Neil, thank you. As always, very interesting ideas, very great thoughts. I was thinking we are recording these sessions so that people can look at them later. And you said so much and so rapidly, I think I'm going to need to go back and re-listen to a few of the points you made. But since if we're going to share joy, let me just share one little experience I had yesterday with some students from a school called Ledbury School, which is run by Julie Rees. It's a values-based school. And we're doing some presentations for some schools in Grenada. And I thought it'd be quite nice if we could include some of the voices of children. So Julie arranged for me to speak with 4 of the kids who are 8, 9 years old, where I was interviewing them about what values are, so that we could use some of this in the presentation. And there was one particular session, and I only noticed it when I was looking back on the recording, when I was putting it together for the presentation, that one of the children was talking about friendship. And I think the concept was how you can use values, and the values of friendship in particular, with the younger kids to help them understand values and to get on with each other. And as she started talking, one of the other children, one of the girls sitting next to her, was beaming with a smile, and she just couldn't be nodding enough. And you could see that in this girl's eyes, she was picturing exactly what the girl who was talking about was relating to, and it was clearly a joyful experience. And just watching that experience of the girl talking in this very confident and positive way about friendship, and the girl next to her with this huge smile, just brought joy to me, and I just felt happy just watching it. So I thought I'd just share that with us all today. Does anybody else have any reflections of joy that they felt recently?
Yes, I could offer some examples. During the time, I have a practice of reflecting on a particular, it's a Sanskrit phrase about, it's called the consciousness, the one consciousness exists in everything. That's the essence of it. And going for walks with that in mind, and looking at the trees, the grass, dogs, people, all of that, what went away were all the names and forms and judgments and comparisons. And there was a connection with it. And there was just a natural contentment and happiness within. And as we passed some people, it was natural smiles, just arose. And it was just something very natural about that. And I think it is part of our nature. Everyone wants to be happy. No one wants to be unhappy. The only problem is we often make mistakes about what we think will make us happy. Money, none of that. will work. But it is part of our natural, our human nature. And I think that's where the reflection and the quietness helps connect with that. In fact, the analogy I find most useful is that our nature is like the sun. It's always shining. And what gets in front is clouds. And the clouds block the view of the sun. And living in this country, we're quite familiar with that, yes. Especially when you see the weather forecasts up in Scotland and the north. But that's what we have to keep remembering and letting go of these ego-based ideas and thoughts. And that's where the real natural, and then the values are like rays of the sun. When someone's honest, when someone is generous, it's just part of our nature manifesting. And I think that's also why it brings great joy and happiness. So.
Oh, very beautiful. Sorry, please go ahead.
I have something to tell. Yesterday, I was telling my 11-year-old granddaughter something I read in a curriculum. I read Emil's book about the gods that were trying to hide love and peace because the humans weren't ready, weren't mature to feel it. And they tried, and finally, spontaneously, my granddaughter said, I know, they did it on their... And that was a moment of full joy because she guessed where they are written, they are hidden here. Thank you.
That's fantastic, Christina. I remember writing that little story for anthology, and it's so true. The things we really appreciate are really under our noses, and they're inside us in our hearts.
Yeah. And she guessed.
Yeah, it picks up on what Paul was saying too, so brilliantly. Thank you for reminding us of that story.
Well, what struck me was your granddaughter just knew. She knew where it was. And I think that's the sad thing, like when Paul talked about the sun and the clouds. I think sometimes even when the sun's shining, people still have the clouds. They won't let the sun shine because maybe they don't feel it's safe. And how do we help? You know, children are so close to that. And I think adults sometimes have shut down on that more and more. So just so beautiful. Thank you both of you.
I like as well what Paul said, because, well, we're from Brazil, and this year, unfortunately, we cannot visit our family as it was scheduled to. It's very difficult, especially for my kids, because that's what we're talking, that families sometimes they are together but they are apart during this pandemic. And I see that and the weather in Belgium is not good as well. It's not easy. So we always, what I keep for them is like, remember, always behind the clouds the sun is there. I always remember. So it was pretty to listen to what Paul said, because that's hope above everything, right? Hope and bringing the joy. So the sun is always shining.
Oh dear, Nigel, we couldn't.
Apologies. Messages of hope are absolutely vital today. Yes, thank you. That's very poignant. I have to say, I'm noticing, I think it's probably within this group in particular, but I'm noticing that how many of us have been referencing nature. So Neil, you referred to it in your talk, and Paul talked about the sun, and Susanna as well. It's quite interesting the role that nature has in joy. So go ahead. You're on mute, Neil. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think that theme, Nigel, is really at the heart. One of the things I've been doing during this period is catching up on what I call basic education. Now, if you say that to a politician, they would talk about literacy and numeracy. Basic education to me is something much more obvious, really, but something that has gone into the distant memory, or has never been in the memory of current generations. So I've been revisiting what some of the great thinkers have said, and I notice Aristotle is here with us today, one of my favorite philosophers, if not the favorite philosopher. So it's very good to see you here, Aristotle. But, you know, I'll hold them up. This book that I found a copy of, it's called Alongside the Child in the Primary School, by a fantastic thinker called Leonard Marsh. Leonard Marsh was the principal of Bishop Grosseteste College, which was a teacher training college in Lincoln. And he and his colleagues really thought deeply about how children best learn and how schools should resource that learning. And Nigel, it was all to do with being aware of nature. Because when children's emotions are stirred by nature, then they naturally learn. First-hand experiences for children up to the age of 6, possibly 7, are vital. And we have generations of children now on their iPads, etc., who haven't experienced seeing, as Paul said, the clouds and the sun, and having someone help them to emotionally connect with those experiences. Good early years practitioners are always reminding me of the need to take children out of doors. Swedish educators, Norwegian educators are always saying those things. Another book that I found a copy of was this one. Many of you in England or the United Kingdom would have been taught Marion Richardson's script for writing. It was one of the ways that children were taught to write in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, particularly. But Marion Richardson also had a lot to say about art and connection with nature. And her work is really worth revisiting now as we think about what is really important in a child's curriculum. Curriculum is what we deliberately plan for children in schools. So what should children really experience, Nigel? And it is that naturalness that connects us to the wonder of the universe. Humanity has become disconnected, and until we connect ourselves fully, we will continue to abuse. Jane told me off this morning because I moved a snail, and I was sorry because I moved it a bit roughly. I didn't intend to, but I probably did. And it reminded me how easily each one of us can act inappropriately out of awareness. And it is values-based education helps people to grow in awareness. And we're all on this journey, including me. I need reminding, as we all do, because old patterns of behavior can crop up that just at that moment when we're not really in the moment. So a return to natural things, Nigel, and is so important. Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to just say one other thing supporting this issue of nature during the lockdown. I'm a photographer, and I went out walking, and I saw, as I was looking at all the plants, different shades of green. So I took numerous photographs of all sorts of plants and everything. I put them into an online book, which I could send to you if you'd like to see it, but then the other thing was I started looking at trees and I started seeing images, sculptures, if you will, in the trees, a horse's face and all sorts of things. And I was just waking up to what's there. It's been there all the time, but you just have to be present to see it. So I have a online tree sculpture book that I can also send to you too. But it was the connection with nature, and it was just beautiful.
Paul, thank you. Do send the link, and what I'll do is I'll connect that with the video that we make available so that people can look at it. You may also want to send a link to your work that you do on values for schools to look at. So for those who don't know, Paul does a very interesting reflective process where he provides material to provoke thought and reflection on individual values. It's very powerful. I'm guessing now that some of the amazing photos he includes in there might be some of his, because it's very beautiful. So if you want to put that link through, I'll include that as well. I think we've probably reached the end of this session. We'll continue with an informal chat for anybody who wants to stay on. But in respect of the formal bit, can I just thank Bridget for the introduction, Jane for that fabulous reflection, and Neil for the great content which will form the subject of quite a lot of reflection for quite a number of people going forward. So thank you, everyone. I would just like to thank, generally, this is now the end of the term. So we're going to break for the holidays, and what we're planning to go forward with these values-based meets is to have twice termly sessions, and the idea will be for it to allow us to share ideas with each other, and to generally connect in ways that sometimes might be difficult otherwise. So we'll give details of those in due course. So could I just wish everyone a very happy holiday. Thank you very much for the unbelievable work that everyone's done in teaching over this last 6 months. It's been extremely stressful. But all I can say is that all the work and effort you put into it is going to be paid back 1,000-fold. So thank you so much. And thank you for joining us at our series of values meets.